Welcome, everyone, to the AI and the Future of Law podcast. I am your co-host, Jen Leonard, founder of Creative Lawyers, here as always with the phenomenal Bridget McCormack, president and CEO of the American Arbitration Association. Hi, Bridget. It's wonderful to see you.
Hi, Jen. Great to see you too. I think this is like meeting two for us of 4 or 5 today. So great day for me.
Great day for me as well. I think we're in meetings together today until we're in our PJs, and we are exceptionally lucky as well to be joined halfway through the day by two of our favorite legal educators, Jonah Perlin from Georgetown University Law Center and Dyane O'Leary from Suffolk University Law School. And Dyane directs Suffolk University Law School's nationally recognized Legal Innovation and Technology Center. She also directs the law school's lit concentration, and she is a professor of legal writing at Suffolk University Law School. So we're thrilled to have Dyane here. Hi, welcome, Dyane.
Hello, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. And we're joined also by Dyane's good friend. We watch them interact a lot together on LinkedIn, which is why we have them here today. They've been talking a lot about AI and legal writing. Jonah Perlin, who is a professor of law and legal practice at Georgetown University Law Center. He teaches and he focuses on first-year legal practice as well as advanced legal writing courses. He is also a podcast host of the How I Lawyer podcast, a top 30 careers podcast for junior lawyers. Welcome, Jonah.
It's so great to be here. And to be honest, what I like to share is that Dyane and I are actually really friends outside of LinkedIn also, which is not always true. So we're pocket friends and real friends. Unless Dyane corrects me, I'm going to say that out loud. And it's also been fantastic following your podcast, Jen and Bridget. So I'm so excited to be here.
I really hope she doesn't correct you on that.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Let's
just say it's fun to see Jonah at a legal writing conference. It always spices up my day.
Love it.
Did you say you're pocket friends?
Yeah, that's a term that I picked up from somebody else during COVID for the friends you make online that you either haven't met or haven't met often in person. And my wife calls them my pocket friends. So I'll say something like, oh, my friend told me that there's this great new game for our kids. And she'll be like, was that a real friend or a pocket friend? And my answer is always pocket friends are real friends.
Yeah, it was sort of like a term coined on, at least in my life, on appellate Twitter in around 2018 or 2017, right? We were pocket friends. And I consider my pocket friends very real friends. So I'm with you guys.
Oh, this is why I need to get on social media. All the fun terms. I don't know anything.
Yeah. Or maybe not. I don't know.
Or not.
Yeah. We're not. Well, I want to be pocket friends with all of you. And we're so thrilled that you're here today. And we're going to kick it off with one of our favorite segments, which are our AI ahas, which help inspire our audience to think about how they might use AI by hearing from you what you've been doing with AI that you think is particularly magical or interesting. And Dyane, we're going to kick it off with you. What have you been using AI for recently?
Sure. Thank you. I first have to disclose that I fully copied the AI AHA and start my Gen AI class with attribution to both of you in your podcast. Students start every week with, from the news, what stuck from the reading or the video assigned, and an AI AHA. And it just kind of kickstarts and orients us, and it's an online class. So it's a great way to kind of settle in and share. And so that's thanks to you all. I completely stole that idea, and it's worked well, and students love it. I have plenty from, kind of the elementary school math problems and the picture of the broken thing in the garage asking ChatGPT to help with. But because I'm here as a teacher, I thought I'd share something I did last week in class. I'm teaching Gen AI and delivery of legal services right now. It's a 35 student upper level elective. So 2Ls and 3Ls and some 4L evening students. And we're starting the course slowly with kind of a, behind the curtain. What is this technology actually doing? And trying to do a mini little vocab understanding of these heavy words like vectors and weights and tokens, and trying to understand the magic. So we did an exercise where students on their own, using any tool they were using, all did a fill in the blank. And the sentence was, the alien ate the sandwich after the hockey game because ... And we all put in the chat at the same time what our output was. And we looked at it. And then right after that, we did the motion for summary judgment should be denied ... And all 35 outputs went in the chat, and we paused and looked at them. And you all will probably guess that the first sentence, the model knew nothing, right? It was all over the place, like alien and sandwich and hockey, and the kind of word statistical magic didn't really know what to do with all that. We talked about why condiments showed up, mustard and ketchup, right? Because of sandwich. But a lot of the answers had the word intergalactic in it. And some had, celebration or trophy because that was related to hockey. And then the summary judgment ones, not remarkably, were much more bland and kind of clustered around the same output because the model had an easier time with that, right? Based on its training data and the way those kind of frankly boring legal words were connected. So it was, students, we talk about these words and we think we understand them, but that was my AI aha for them. And it was great for me to see a little bit of a light bulb, like, oh, that's where the prediction engine is going wrong, or that's why it's kind of funky with that prompt, or that's why it's doing better with the summary judgment prompt. So that was my learning AI aha for both me and my students just last week.
That's pretty cool. It's a great way to sort of illustrate vector embedding, right? To show like what vector embedding is to a new audience. I like that a lot. That's fun.
I was with a bunch of lawyers this weekend, and we were at a cocktail reception, and people were saying that they listened to the AI ahas, and they say, we loved listening to Bridget and how she's doing these mind-bending AI ahas, and she's like bringing people back to life and creating humanoid robots and like running all these amazing experiments. And then you offer yours, and it's like you're inviting your neighborhood over and dividing by 6 of your local restaurant. And I'm like, I could do that one. So I offer the AI ahas for the everyman. So we like to inspire from the sublime to the mundane. So it's good to hear that we're reaching your class as well. Jonah, what have you been using AI for?
Sure. So I'm currently on sabbatical, so I'm focused mostly on the writing side of my job, which is kind of odd because I mostly spend time on my teaching side of the job usually. And one of the things that I've been experimenting with my own writing is using AI. And when I say using AI, I mean using basic ChatGPT, basic Claude, basic Gemini, not sort of specialized legal models, to sort of be a discussion partner with the articles that I'm writing, and of a very specific type. Everybody writes differently, right? I am one of those writers that I need to write the same sentence 50 or 60 times before I'm happy with it. And that means I just write a lot. I have a lot of messy drafts. I have no problem moving to the next paragraph before the first paragraph is not perfect because I know I'm going to come back and rewrite it a bunch of times. But unfortunately, in the past, that conversation about my own writing just lives in my own head, which is not that helpful, at least some of the time. I think ultimately maybe it's helpful, but it takes a long time and a lot of errors. And so what I've been doing is sort of writing a paragraph that's not perfect, right? Messy first draft, draft 0, whatever you want to call it. And not just asking the AI to make it better, because again, like to use Diane's example, I don't think better, like it doesn't know what better is, even if I've given it a lot of information about purpose and audience and document type. But instead, I ask it to critique and offer advice in the mindset or voice of, and then I pick key scholars from my field that I'm pretty confident the AI will sort of know based on its training data or have experience based on its training data. And it's extremely helpful. Now, caveat, right? I don't know if that's exactly the feedback those people would give, but it's helpful feedback in the sense that it puts it in someone else's voice. And then I tried it based on a workshop that I did after I had actually got feedback from one of the people I often use. I won't out them on the podcast, but one of the names I often use in my prompt. And his feedback was almost exactly the same as AI predicted. And I was like, wow, this is a, sample size N of 1, but pretty wild that you can sort of have this thought partner that's not just, your friend or your spouse or your kids, but actually a thought partner that's been trained linguistically on any legal scholar in history. So it's been an interesting experience. Sometimes it gives me terrible outputs, but 99 times out of 100, it's given me really helpful thought-provoking ideas.
Very cool. I love that. So Let's dive into thinking about legal education and how you all are thinking about it. It's very hard. I find it very hard thinking about people who are coming into law school today in fall of 2025, what they'll need to practice in 3 years from now, because the technology is changing so quickly, and because legal education, we all know, does not change as quickly by design. So from your perspective, what do you think every law student should need to know about AI, regardless of how the technology changes over the next 3 years when they step into practice? And Dyane, maybe we can start with you on this one and then hear from Jonah.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So much, but I'll caveat that as there's not time for all of it, right? We could redesign the entire 3 years of law school to focus on Gen AI, but even saying that out loud, no, of course we shouldn't do that. There's a lot of reasons we should redesign law school in different ways, but I don't know that it's all for Gen AI. One thing I think is a healthy dash of humility. So it's changed each year now. Even with these students, the fresh crop of the last few weeks, students are more and more experienced with these tools now coming in, right? Compared to even just a few years ago. But what I think every law student should know is that using these tools in their personal world, which is terrific, and as we've talked about, a great way to play and learn and get comfortable, is still not using them in legal workflows. So I think, what every student needs to know is a healthy dose of, I'm not a lawyer yet. I haven't experienced legal workflows. I don't understand, kind of how things work yet. And so kind of, again, a healthy skepticism or patience, if you will, of how they're going to use them as lawyers. If I can offer another one, I also think that students need to have a question set. I have been so surprised to hear my students come back to me after internships and externships and jobs telling me that they're either told nothing about use of AI, they have kind of a one little policy that is pretty unclear about what they can use and when, or some that are getting great direction and training. So I tell my students, so much is going to change. At least have, 4 or 5 questions that no matter when you leave this building in any work environment, clerkship, setting, you ask, what am I using? What am I allowed to, and know the lay of the land. So I think, we can talk about prompting skills and all those things about students of today, but to me, those are kind of the basics of the humility to know that you need a legal skill set to use these legal tools, and also kind of know enough to ask what you don't know and figure out kind of where you're going and what they're comfortable with, because as we all know, that is a huge varied landscape right now, and I think will be for a while.
First of all, I would agree with everything Dyane said. I think being able to have a question set is probably the most important skill that we can give our students going forward. What I would add or rephrase or think about in a slightly different way is, on the one hand, I think nothing should change about law school, right? And that's sort of an extreme version of what I mean to say. But actually, I think, going back to, well, what do you learn as a law student, right? I often say on my podcast that one of the best parts about getting a JD is you can do anything with it. And one of the most challenging parts about getting a JD is you can do anything with it. By definition, we are training individuals to do lots of different things in a 3-year period in a very sort of confined time and energy and space. One thing we try to give law students in their 3 years is we change the way they think, the way they read, the way they act, the way they understand the world. That part shouldn't change. That is going to, in my view, be even more important in sort of a AI enhanced legal world, because that's what differentiates us. It's our judgment, it's our strategy, it's our history, it's our reasoning. Those things, we have a way of teaching them. Now, I agree with Dyane. I don't think we're always doing the best job at teaching them, and there are ways to change our legal pedagogy. But ultimately, the ability to think like a lawyer is going to become, I think, more important, not less important, in an AI-enhanced world. At the same time, what it means to sort of act like a lawyer is changing much more rapidly than maybe it did 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And because of that, I don't think we should even have the goal of teaching every law student to be able to explain AI as it exists today. I think that's a good goal to be able to sort of have those next level conversations. Instead, I think what we need to do is give them the meta skills of, how do I deal with a brand new tool, right? How do I deal with a tool that by definition didn't exist when I went to law school? That's what the model rules of professional conduct, I think, are going to require of future lawyers. And it's what future legal employers are going to require of future lawyers. So on the one hand, it's keep learning to think like a lawyer. And on the other hand, it's giving people skills and techniques to sort of handle the brave new world that by definition will always be braver and newer the second they get into it.
Jonah, that reminds me of something our dean at Suffolk Law School always used to say when he started the first innovation in technology kind of collection of classes over a decade ago, that it was teaching a new kind of issue spotting. That up until then, law school was always about spotting substantive black letter law issues. And his point in terms of modern legal practice skills is a new type of issue spotting is, where can I spot new efficiencies here? Where can I find new ways to do this in a more efficient, effective way that saves my, client money or time or improves my workflow? And that reminds me of what Jonah said in terms of the meta skill to approach a workflow. Plenty of our students, frankly, are still struggling with using Word and Excel and all sorts of other tools. So I agree with Jonah that, our role as educators is maybe to plant the seed in a little bit tool agnostic way. Because we don't know even today, what our students are going to be using, much less in, 3 or 4 years.
That's all super interesting. And it does sound like you all agree an awful lot. It sounds like we have a lot of alignment in this particular conversation about what the role law schools should play is in a sort of rapidly changing technological world. And it feels totally right to me that unless our students have the background kind of legal architecture and understand, what is public law, what is private law, what are the sources of law, where do I go find the sources of law to make sure they're correct? The tools are not that useful to somebody who's going to use them as a lawyer, right? So law schools are going to continue to have this fundamental pedagogical mission that in some ways is unchanged and, will be unchanged no matter what the technology does. On the other hand, I think, Jen's question was kind of focused on how lawyers practice their craft. And it clearly is not going to look in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years like it does today, right? So, and law schools have some obligation to make sure that their students are practice ready, whatever that means. I know there's lots of debate about what that means. But so this is not literally I want to know question. I feel like law schools have so many constraints in thinking about what they can do differently. The regulator requires a lot. Your students require a lot. Your alumni require a lot. Your administration requires a lot. It's hard to, just innovate wildly. What do you think law schools should be doing to try and start to figure out how to produce practice-ready lawyers for a changing world? And maybe what are the experiments you're seeing, either at your law schools or hearing about at other law schools that you think merit more attention?
I agree. I think, Bridget, you capture that tension, which frankly is a tension, again, that's not that new, right? I've had a bunch of conversations recently with my colleagues who have taught legal research and writing for not just years, but decades. And they talk about the shift of what it was like to teach legal research and writing with book research as opposed to online research, right? That was a sea change that fundamentally changed not just what they had to teach, but also how they had to teach it. So that part, I think, is not entirely new, although certainly somewhat more expansive, because I think this touches on literally everything that a law school does, right? The challenge, I'll just be straight up. I think the biggest challenge that law schools are facing right now is they are worried about the question of how they deal with AI in the present in relation to how they grade students. And I think any conversation about preparing practice-ready lawyers is always going to be next to or maybe behind the question of how are we going to do what we've done for the last 100 years plus since Christopher Columbus Langdell created the curriculum, right? How do we test students? How do we do an issue spotter where frankly, the AI can issue spot almost as well as the average 1L, because that's a perfect task to ask an AI to do. And so I think the challenge from my perspective, and I want to listen to Dyane on the experiment piece because I think she'll have more on the ground advice. But the tension that I keep seeing is, how do we grade our students in a way that makes them practice ready? And I don't think there are answers to that question yet. And frankly, I think I'm maybe in the minority, at least in my home institution, of we need to integrate AI throughout the curriculum, graded assignments and ungraded, in order to do this right. We can't just put our head in the sand. But I think there's reasonable minds can differ. And I think my colleagues who would come out on the other side have really compelling reasons why we should pretend that AI doesn't exist as a path to getting AI ready lawyers.
Yeah, Jonah, I think reasonable minds couldn't differ more on this subject from what I've heard over the past 3 years and how this evolved. But you're right, kind of the knee-jerk academic integrity reaction, right, is still front and center at a lot of universities in terms of locking it down, prohibiting, kind of how do we work our old model of everything into this new world. That being said, I think, that has certainly changed at a lot of law schools in different pockets. So maybe it would be helpful to kind of think about where and how AI is getting into law schools. One is elective. So there's a new group, AI law professors, and some of us have taught these classes before, but certainly I have folks reach out to me probably every week. I'm designing a new AI elective for such and such law school. Can you share your syllabus? So that's a pocket, right? That doesn't touch every law student, but that's a growing set of electives, just like e-discovery didn't exist 20 years ago as an elective, right? And now it does. So there's that pocket. The other huge one is that legal writing course, which that's a way to touch in an important way in a small setting, usually, right? All your law students. And again, that's been kind of a sea change as well. I think, well, I'm not going to guess how many, but many legal writing programs are experimenting with how to get this into their students' experience. For what you just said, Bridget, recognizing that this is the practice of law now, some aspect of this. And that's always been the task of that legal practice experience. How do we get these students kind of ready? But what I think is interesting is I think the pushback to that is, well, you're going to outsource it. They're not going to know how to do it. They're just going to chat GPT their legal memos. But what's so remarkable to me is everyone I've spoken with or seen that's integrating it into that first year class is doing it with this really terrific balance of what Jonah said of like back to basics. And here's an example. So yes, you're maybe working with students on prompting and evaluating outputs and talking about kind of ethical use of AI. But then maybe 2 weeks later, you're doing an oral mock exercise where they have to come into my office and brief me on a legal issue. Now, they can use ChatGPT all they want to prep for that, but it's just me and them, right? And chatting across from someone is a hard legal practice skill for today's generation, but so valuable because you can't cheat it. You have to really kind of know the information. More legal writing programs, it seems, are also shifting a little bit back to a closed type of exam. So for instance, at Suffolk, we've embraced AI. We're integrating Hotshot Legal's AI modules into the first year fall curriculum. We are doing an exercise on outputs and prompting and all the things. But for the first time in a while, students will take a closed legal writing final in December with their brain, their fingertips, their laptop, and a closed packet of materials, and they'll have to draft something in 3 hours. So again, the kind of floodgates are, we can't, revamp the entire curriculum for AI. Most programs are doing it really with that balance of, and it feels kind of counterintuitive, but it's actually, like Jonah said, you need those critical thinking skills yourself to use these tools. So how do we get at ensuring both are going on? And also the bar exam, right? We all have to prepare our students still for the bar exam. So that's kind of the carrot for students, if you will, of you're going to learn this technology that's going to help you become more practice ready, but you also need to develop that skill set that all of us developed decades ago for all sorts of other reasons. So I feel like that's kind of where law schools are at. And I'll add what I didn't say, and I don't think the kind of core curriculum of teaching doctrine and that issue spotting and the one-stop exam and maybe a take-home paper, from my point of view, has not changed one single bit. We're picking at it on these edges, and that's what I have seen from the last year or two.
Yeah, could I put together that comment that you just made, Dyane, with a comment that Jonah made earlier, which is the sort of focus on the present, concerns around what does this mean for current academic concerns and how we assess performance and how we ensure academic integrity and sort of experimentation and chipping around the edges through electives, and connect it with a really real question that I get in my own family, right? So my stepdaughter is really considering law school in a couple of years. And I feel like I used to have a fairly solid response to people who were considering law school, which was work for a few years, consider what you enjoy doing, align that with what lawyers do every day, go spend time in a lawyer's shoes or shadowing a lawyer and see if that's what you really want to do. And now I'm not sure that that is the right advice anymore, because I now spend a lot more time working with legal organizations trying to adapt to the change created by AI, and recognizing what you're saying, that schools are focused on, how to transform today. Like, what should the advice be to people thinking about going to law school in a couple of years? Should it be the same advice as always, or should people be thinking differently about it, do you think? Jonah?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to sound like a broken record, which is an sort of an odd piece of technology to bring into this conversation, right? But or you could ask my children what a CD or an album is, and they have no concept because they just pick songs individually on Spotify. But I think it's still good advice to see what lawyers are doing today. I think like so much in 2025 and in the modern age is yes and, right? I think it's important to see what actual lawyers do in order to figure out whether or not this is the profession for you or what kind of lawyer you can be. One of the great parts, I think, about being a lawyer in 2025 or going to law school in 2025 is there is so much more information about the kinds of ways you can use your JD in ways that just was not true, where everybody kind of went in assuming that they were going to do one of two things and they kind of fell into the natural. What I'm seeing from my students now is they come into law school with a recognition that there are lots of different things to do. But in order to do that effectively, you need to do more work on the front end of learning what fits your skill set, what fits your interests, how do you want to spend your days. I don't think AI changes that at all. At the same time, I think this is an opportunity for junior lawyers, right? I just wrote this paper about billing and generative AI, and there's a lot of, I think rightfully so, concern that we're going to lose all the tasks that junior lawyers always did. I think there's some truth to that, but I actually think there's a real opportunity for junior lawyers to stand out in today's legal organizations and law firms because they are going to be more native in this technology. And so to the extent that some of this is playing without a playbook, they have actually a better set of skills and intuition and experiences that will help their organizations. The version of that in my own career was when I was a junior lawyer, the partners didn't know how to use PowerPoint and all their clients wanted people to use PowerPoint. And guess what? I got put on case teams and got to do things that I never would have gotten to do based on my level of legal knowledge, simply because I could use a tool. And I think that times 10, times 100, times 1,000 is a possibility with AI. So I think you should still tell your stepdaughter and others, go see what lawyers do, try it on, see how it fits, but also try to build some of these tech skills that I think are going to be table stakes for the next generation of lawyers.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jen. I think the challenge might be kind of maybe trying to observe, dare I say, some higher level lawyering. And what I mean by that is this has always been a problem. I mean, I was a big law lawyer billing and doing document review. If someone had observed me those first year or two, I don't know, they'd be all that impressed or excited to become a lawyer, me clicking away on a big document review at a big firm. That being said, if they maybe saw a senior associate doing a deposition or our junior partner leading a large mediation, right? So I think the reality is that kind of the lower level work, if we will, and we'll all put that in quotes for so many reasons, has always kind of existed, and it has been part of a lawyer's workflow. So it really matters kind of at what level are you trying to observe, and that's part of lawyering. But if you're thinking about really going into it as a profession, is it even more important to see what's beyond those tools now, right? What's kind of the higher level, the counseling? How does someone become a trusted business advisor? What does that look like when they're taking a call from a client in crisis? Or what about a prosecutor who has 40 motions on the docket that day, right? And Gen AI has not impacted their workflow whatsoever. I'd love my students to get into a courthouse in Boston and just watch and learn. So, I think those of us that, are really involved in the AI space, we sometimes forget that it hasn't touched every aspect of lawyering. I think it will. And I think it is behind the scenes, but I think there's still plenty of the profession kind of still out there, so to speak, for those students to still capture.
Thank you both. I'll play this for her.
I think I might have I might know your answer to this, but I'd love to hear it directly. Do you think that this technology is just a fundamentally different challenge for law schools than prior ways of technology? Jonah, I was actually in law school in the old days where we had to still use the books to shepherdize, and people would like hide the books, and it was like that whole thing. And although the technology was available, so some of us were like, why do we have to do the book thing? Like, is that really a good use of our time? How about we talk more about the substantive law and not the like book hiding thing? So I don't know. How do you think of it? Is it just fundamentally different than other tech advancements, or do you think no, it's just the latest tech advancement, and lawyers figured out how to use email, and they figured out how to use online search, so they'll figure this out too?
I do think it's fundamentally different. The line I draw in my brain is, and I don't know if this is a right one, you can correct me, but business of law and the practice. And to me, the internet and COVID's remote lawyering boom. And now I want my students to be aware of, doing a Zoom interview and all those skills that have kind of come because of that. To me, that was always kind of the how of lawyering, the processes, the business. To me, this technology strikes more at the substance of lawyering. It really does. Kind of the words, the way we build, the essence of our arguments, all of those things that aren't just channels of how the lawyering is happening. It's the actual substance. So that's probably oversimplified, but that's where I come out, that it does feel different than simply just reminding students of maybe their, obligations under cloud computing, or telling them to wear a suit on a Zoom meeting, after the pandemic. This feels like a different opportunity and a different challenge because it's striking at the heart of them actually building the work product.
Yeah, I think we may have found a place where Dyane and I disagree a little bit. Like, I actually think this is a natural progression of tech change in lawyering. When I was in law school, which was at the time when we were switching from books to, I was in law school actually during the switch to natural language research, right? And so was learning going from Boolean to natural language. So like, there's always changes in every generation. I also took a class that was taught by an adjunct because we didn't have any members of the faculty. I went to Georgetown, where I now teach. We didn't have any members of the faculty who could teach an internet or computer law class. And so I had an adjunct professor teach it. We now have, I think, a faculty of 20 or 30 who just do law and technology. And that's not even the people like me who focus more on technology of law. I took a class called cyber law, which was essentially like a one-stop shop. We did 1 week on First Amendment, 1 week on copyright. Now that feels so foreign in the sense that, like, how could you not talk about technology in literally every single doctrinal class? I just think that would be almost impossible at this point. I can't think of a class where this would not come up. And in that sense, I think generative AI is the next version of that, of the internet of computers. So I think Dyane and I are probably in alignment on most of the what, but how I describe it, I think I would say it's just the natural progression.
Yeah, I think, Jonah, those are the two buckets that law schools, when we say legal tech in law school, I get that phrase a lot. What do you do? What does that mean? What's the legal tech landscape? There really are those two lanes, and a lot of people conflate them: technology of law and law of technology, right? So the law of technology, to me, is what Jonah described, kind of the evolution of cybersecurity classes, or, emerging regulatory issues because of AI, or Do you need a warrant for someone's Alexa device, right? Kind of those type of things. To me, technology of law is more kind of the, how are you building, delivering your legal services, whether you're productizing it, whether you're using one tab instead of the 8 that I had open when I was a law student. And now I'm researching and writing and editing all in one tab. So those are just the 2 buckets that, again, I think are different things are happening. But to me, kind of the skills bucket is where I see that as really novel compared to anything that's transformed what students are doing in that bucket before.
Interesting perspectives. I would love to talk about novelty colliding with things we know really well. Those things being the rules of the Bluebook, Dyane. And I was really fascinated. I have to tell you that my first collision with the Bluebook happened right after I took 1L exams, and I sat down to write for Law Review and other journals. And I stood up after 2 hours into this experience, and I ended up walking out because I was like, if the reward for this is doing more of this, I don't want to do any of this. So I was never on a journal, and that was the end of my relationship with the Bluebook, essentially. But you all stuck with it, and you had an amazing post about new Bluebook rule 18.3, which relates to citing outputs from generative AI. Can you talk a little bit about what 18.3 is and try to walk us through the mind-bending nature of trying to capture AI outputs and your thoughts on the wisdom of that approach?
Sure, although I'm hesitant to lose too many listeners when we talk about Bluebook. I don't want to be known as the Bluebook person here, because that's going to get a lot of people to
Well, I will speak for the non-Bluebookers out there. I've never been fascinated by the Bluebook my entire life until I saw this post. So stay tuned if you don't like the Bluebook. It's really quite something.
Yes, the Bluebook has become relevant these days again. No, I'm certainly not the first to have kind of a critique of it. And let's put it in context. The Bluebook has always been more of a, if you will, scholarly, focused academic writing with a piece of practitioner writing, right? Courts and such might pay attention, but its roots really were in and remain, I think, in kind of that scholarly academic world. Why does that matter? Because when we look at the new rule and you look at it in that lens, there's that plagiarism concern. And for years, scholars have talked about kind of the difference between law school, where we're so focused on attribution and avoiding plagiarism, and it has to be your own work. But yet the second you get into legal practice, right? Copy, use that person's standard of review paragraph, right? Plagiarize everything with your legal hat on. So that's the context. It's not really new in terms of the clash. But 18.3, I always tell my kids, something is better than nothing. Like, do something. If nothing is not good, do something. Here, I don't know that something was better than nothing. So 18.3 kind of punts at the beginning. So a lot of those that read it think, oh, it's going to tell me whether and when I should cite generative AI. But it really doesn't. It sort of just assumes one would be citing it. Now, to me, that's the first hurdle. Like, guidance is, should I cite it? Now, I'll give you my opinion. I don't think you should, but it kind of leaps over that and then just says, when a writer is citing, and gives kind of a clunky actual citation format that has you saving screenshot captures of all your prompts. So I'll pause there and maybe invite your listeners, think of your last maybe iteration or prompt with AI. If you're doing it well, I hope, and I'm doing it well, I hope, it's not one sentence, it's not one page, it's a back and forth conversation. So when we think just how cumbersome and unrealistic that is for there to be kind of like a saved PDF screenshot. So that's kind of the practical yellow flag. And then that leads to kind of the ethical yellow flag is what's in all those prompts, right? Is there client information? Is that my work product? And what the potential ethical risks would be disclosing, and the burden to kind of comb through that. Am I redacting parts of my citation in a privilege log, right? I mean, you can get kind of a lot of layers down there. So I invite folks to look at it. The commentary thus far has been quite strong of this is not workable, that maybe it's workable in the academic sense if we think that Gen AI outputs should be cited. But I don't know of any lawyer that has embraced this and said, I really think it's important. And I will share that what I plan to tell my students, and it's hard because you want to focus on citation for all the good reasons, right? It's your credibility, it's your explanation to the reader. I plan to tell my students that if you think you need to cite a generative AI output, that probably means you're using the tool wrong. You're either using it, right? You're not doing it the right way. It shouldn't be a source that you feel like you need to cite to support your writing. So that's where I think I'm going to come out, which is basically telling them to turn that page and not really look at 18.3.
Jonah, do you have anything to add to that?
I agree with Dyane. I mean, I try to read the Bluebook rules. Also, these are my people. If we're talking about AI in the Bluebook, I found the right place in my corner of the internet. If I think you have to read the Bluebook generally, not just in this context, as like, what question is it trying to answer? And when I read 18.3 for the first time, I assumed that the question was, if I need to cite, and this goes back to Diane's question of like, when are you going to use this? If I need to cite an output. So for example, let's say there is a dispute between two parties about the advice that AI gave them about a contract that goes to whether or not the contract was formed or how it was formed, right? They need to cite that as an exhibit, right? Then they would use this rule on how to cite that chat. This is not a rule about how you came up with your brief or your answer. We don't cite junior we don't cite junior associates. We don't cite Google searches. We don't. So to me, I just read this. I was not surprised or sort of I did not become emotionally triggered by this rule because I assumed that it would get used once in a blue moon. Others seem to have assumed something different, and that's where I think all of the stress about this rule came out of. And I'm just gonna, unless someone tells me otherwise, I'm going to assume that that is at least a reasonable way to read that rule.
The challenge is students crave that guidance, right? They are new legal writers, new legal thinkers, and for them, when to cite an authority is not always kind of a clear cut. So that's, to me, the biggest challenge. It kind of just punts that back at them and leaves us to fill in that guidance. But I completely agree. It was left in no man's land, if you will, and folks are having their own interpretation of it.
Right. But at that point, I agree with you. I mean, it's not an authority, right? Typically, you're citing it. You only need to cite it in this way when you're using it as an authority. And I think it comes back to the sort of, my students would hate me for saying this because I say it all the time, right? Authority is the building block of all legal analysis. But how often are you actually citing generative AI as that authority? It is a tool to get you to authority.
That all sounds right to me. And I want to confess a couple of things. I haven't thought about the Bluebook in, I don't know, decades. The Michigan Supreme Court very helpfully had its completely own citation norms and rules, which is really helpful. So you just when you come practice in the Michigan Supreme Court, you have to just learn a totally different way to cite everything in your brief. By the way, lawyers should figure all this out and just come up with like one way. Like there should be a citation singularity, and I nominate you two to get us there. Second, during your conversation, I started thinking like, who writes the Bluebook? Like, who's in charge of the Bluebook? Do you guys all know this? Do you all know who's in charge? Of course, I went to Gemini. It's like 4 law reviews. It's the Harvard, Yale, Penn, and I already forgot, Columbia law reviews. So it's law students coming up with it. And that's a little bit insane. I mean, I love you law students. Some of my favorite people are law students, but what? Anyway, okay. One final question. This one's going to go to you, Jonah. You posted recently about the benefits of multimodality in the large language models, and the ability to talk to your chatbot might be something that lawyers could get some use out of. Can you talk a little bit about what you're thinking there and how you think that that function might be useful to lawyers?
Yeah, totally. That post came out of I've been experimenting with there are a couple of really great, I think they're really great, effective speech to text tools out there. And I've basically been trying to use speech to text tools as long as they existed. And I will tell you, when I was in law school, when I was trying to use speech to text tools, they were terrible. You had to like learn all the lingo and you had to pronounce all your pronunciation. It was not very helpful. And I've been so impressed about the ability to just talk out an email and have it formatted properly and the names are spelled properly and you don't have to say your punctuation. And I find that I speak very differently than I write. And sometimes I need both in order to get the best work. And so that's a great opportunity that these tools provide. But what it made me think about is there was a day and age where a lot of lawyers use speech to text. They just did it through another human being, right? My parents are not lawyers, but I remember as a child, my dad walking around with a dictaphone and, talking through the journal of our vacation. And then he paid to have somebody type it up after the vacation. And it opens up a whole new range of potential opportunities, some of which are sort of what is old is new again. And now I just kind of wish that I had learned how to dictate because it's a totally different skill. And maybe somebody will create like a really great class on how to dictate as a lawyer because the tools are there now. They're there today. The last thing I'll add on the multimodality is the cool part is the dictaphone couldn't talk back to you. And now the generative AI tools can talk back to you and it can create an incredible opportunity to use the exact same tool, but using a different medium. And so I'm honestly just excited about where that's going. And I think lawyers don't realize we're a text-based profession, how many opportunities the fact that this technology is text-driven, but not exclusively text-based will provide.
And Jonah, my students are doing so many interesting things. They've told me about that. So I had a student who talked to me about how she uploaded her evidence outline and just like on Bluetooth and just engaged with it and quizzed herself, right? Kind of as a tutor, which was amazing. I had my students listen to my syllabus through Google's Notebook LM as a podcast. And we talked about, was it, how receiving information that way differed than just kind of a boring PDF syllabus. So I think we talked about different pockets of legal education, the academic support space. I think academic support educators are doing a lot of great forward thinking work on how this technology can be used as kind of the next best personalized tutor in all these different modalities for students that really today learn wildly differently than we all did.
Yeah, I love that. I use I use voice mode for so many different things. And now that I work really primarily out of my home and I don't have office mates, I find it so helpful to talk through things with a chatbot in a voice mode much more than writing. And I know a lot of lawyers like to think through writing, but I've learned that that's not really how I process information. And to both of your points, I feel like, and Bridget and I have talked about this on other podcasts, if I had had access to this as a law student, I think my entire educational experience would have been much different if I could have engaged with the content through that format. So it's wonderful for all of your students that they have such forward-looking professors who are thinking in innovative and experimental ways about how to support all of their learning. Unfortunately, we're out of time today, but it was so wonderful to see both of you. I hope you'll be my pocket friends going forward. But I hope that is the end of our conversations about the Bluebook, because that's the end of my fascination with it. It's like the one and only time in my life I've been fascinated by the Bluebook. Bridget, you made me feel a little bit better there at the end. I thought maybe I was the only person on earth not into the Bluebook, maybe. But it's good that you all are. But we're really, really grateful for all of you for spending your time with us. Jonah, we know you're on sabbatical, so we hope you enjoy your time away from campus this year. Dyane, we know you are not on sabbatical this year, so this is an especially busy time during the year for you. We're really grateful to you for spending it with us. Any closing thoughts, Bridget, for our guests today?
No, it's just a pleasure to have you both, and makes me excited about the future of legal education. If you all are on every faculty across the country, I think we're in good shape.
Humanoid robots of Jonah and Dyane for our next AI ahas.
Just upload us to the cloud and we'll figure it out.
On our next episode. Until then, thanks to everybody for joining us on this episode of AI and the Future of Law. We'll see you next time. Till then, be well.